And now we present to you Thac0 with Advantage.
Welcome to Thac0 with Advantage. We're two friends that have been playing D&D a long time. While we both love lots of other RPGs, D&D is the game always stocked in our pantry at home. Hi, I'm Ange, and I've been playing D&D about once a week since I started playing back in 1986. So when I go out, I like to try other things. It doesn't mean I don't like D&D. It just means I want to play all the other things. And because I like RPGs, I talk about them a lot, and I've been doing that since 2014 on Gnome Stew and doing podcasts since 2017.
Hi, I'm Jared, and I approve this ad. Wait, no. I approve of playing D&D and other fantasy RPGs. You can find stuff that I've written at Gnome Stew and whatdoiknowjr.com if you would like to read them. After we look at the games we're running in the campaign journal, we'll be talking about running one-shots in D&D and other fantasy games. Then we'll have some recommendations of D&D related content for you to check out in our downtime research segment.
Let me just finish up this campaign journal.
Since we last talked, I'm still waiting on our next session for City of Cowls. That's probably not going to happen until the middle of February due to a couple of cons falling on our gaming weekends and other shenanigans. Speaking of cons, I was at Page, Philadelphia Area Game Expo in mid-January, and I'll be at Running Gag, a college con in Geneseo, New York, this coming weekend, which will be the weekend right before this one drops, so it'll have already happened. At Page, I did play in a Fabula Ultima game themed on Octopath Traveler, so while not D&D, it was a fantasy game using a cool system designed to emulate JRPGs. And it was a lot of fun. It ended up having a fun time travel twist where we saved a hapless groom from his bitter older self who had come back in time to fix all his mistakes. I also got to play the rogue and do rogue type things. So if you know me, you know that made me happy. Because of that, and because Steam had a sale, I bought Octopath Traveler and I started playing it. I was able to get in a session of the Old Margrave. We picked up with them investigating the kidnapping of Barston Gallon, the merchant who had been selling their ageless honey on consignment. The honey puts someone to sleep where their body is in stasis and does not age, hence the name Ageless Honey. It is highly desired by the Shadow Fae, and it's considered dangerous and highly valuable. And so in last session, as they investigated the shop that had been basically obviously shaken down and helped Barston's assistant who'd been knocked out, Zartath found the ledgers, so he knew who the last two bidders on the honey were. One was an elf scholar named Civis Nyabalar and a Zobek noblewoman named Inel Angeril. The ledger showed that Barston had halted the bidding and sold the honey to Civis, even though Inel seemed to have been willing to continue bidding. So there was something going on there where Barston didn't feel comfortable selling to her anymore. With this information, the PCs first went to Civis. They didn't think he was involved in the kidnapping, but they figured that if the woman had kidnapped Barston, she might go after Civis next to get her hands on the actual honey, because the honey had already been given to Civis. But they found him, and again, the PCs let Zartath do the talking, which is hilarious because he has no charisma skills. I don't think he has a negative anymore, but it's definitely not good to let the snarky kobold wizard be your face person. But that player is the one who generally puts himself forward. This conversation immediately set Civis on edge, and it took a little while to get everything sorted out. Ultimately, the honey was safe, and Civis had seen no one coming for him, but he also very pointedly pointed out to the PCs they shouldn't wait to lay a trap when a man's life was in danger. Male's player wasn't able to attend this session, so they chose to have him stay behind with Civis as a bodyguard/decoy. So off to Inel Angeril's house, they used message to try and contact Barston in the house, and all they got back was pain and panic and pleading for help. We did have a little bit of a rules argument about message because I had always thought it was line of sight. That's not how it's written. You need to have a general idea that the person you're aiming at is in the vicinity, and they have to be within 150 feet. And having been on my Critical Role BS for a while, they use it all the time without necessarily knowing exactly where the person is. And I'm like, yeah, you guys are 90% certain he is in this house. I am fine with you pointing at the house and sending a message. And they're like, well, if you're willing to allow it. And I'm like, yes, because this makes sense with the way the rules are written. Anyway, they tried to be stealthy and break in, but of course, eventually things devolved into a fight with the 2 guards and 2 blood imps that were on the main floor. Basically, there was one point where they were sneaking through kind of a bedroom section of the house, and somebody, like one of the guards rolled well enough to hear something, somebody rolled a stealth check well enough to low, and I basically gave them a chance to all duck out and, like, hide, but Turvin decided to stand in the middle of the hallway, waiting, and I'm like, okay, here comes a fight. After they dealt with them, they did a search of the house, and they found a secret hatch that led down to her basement laboratory under the house. And there, the fight got messy. There were 4 thugs, 2 blood imps, and Nell, a blood mage, and she ended up conjuring a blood elemental. It was a really tough fight because she had regeneration, and the blood elemental was pretty tough. Now, the thugs and the blood imps were negligible, but there was enough of them that they caused problems. You know, by the time we got to the last round, Dahlia was down, Grish was down, Zartath and Turvin had a handful of hit points between them, and Nevrim, while full hit points, was basically playing keep away with the elemental. This is when Zartath went full John Wick. He used 2 charges of the Ring of the Ram to slam Nell into the wall, and then used Arcane Alacrity to cast Firebolt, upon which he rolled a natural 20. Bam! How do you want to do this? Thankfully, the blood elemental disappeared the moment she was down. We ended there and intend to pick up with downtime the next time we play. I was actually hoping we'd have time to do all the downtime stuff at the end of this session, but by the time we got to the end of the fight with Nell, it was already like past 11:30, and it was like, yeah, we're not gonna keep going. We had a snowstorm coming in. It's just, let's all go to bed and get a good night's sleep before, we have to shovel everything out in the morning. Even though sometimes I find this particular combination of people as a group frustrating, Dahlia's player complimented me on the game, saying that he is loving it, and he loves how it doesn't feel like a pre-written adventure, even though I'm using the adventures that are in the old Margrave. It took me a minute to realize he was complicating me because he's like, it doesn't feel like a campaign. And then I'm like, oh, I get what you're saying. Okay, thank you.
Now I get it. Now I understand.
Now I get it.
There may come a day in 2026 when I get to run a fantasy RPG again, but it is not this day. However, I did get to play in Brandis Stoddard's Sword of West Marches campaign for the first time in over a year with my Githyanki Circle of Stars druid. For this particular session, not only did I have one of the game designers that works for Dimension 20 and Worlds Beyond Number as a DM, which is what Brandis is, but also Hannah Rose is one of the players in the particular session that I was in, who also is a game designer for Dimension 20 and Worlds Beyond Number. So I'm nobody, but it was kind of neat to play in their presence.
Hey, you're not nobody. You're not nobody. But I get what you're saying.
So if you don't remember the last time I've talked about this campaign, basically we're all part of this large mercenary company. There's ongoing plots in the world that generate little missions to follow up on, and then various groups, when we do schedule a session, talk about which ones of those open-ended things are going on, and that's what we do for the evening. I didn't want to drag everyone into basically the only plot line that I have managed to come up with, which is, hey, are there illithids showing up on this planet? Because there shouldn't be. It's a one-note thing, but I don't get to play them that often, so that's going to be a theme for Githyanki. But what we did end up doing is following up on this necromancer dragon who is raising an army of the undead on the borders of the nation where the mercenary company is stationed. And we kind of wanted to follow up on that, and we had 2 witches in the party, so we ended up having to speak to this one very notorious witch who has a bad reputation. Kind of one of those things where it's like, she's probably evil, but also she's kind of useful, and she's not like cackling evil, take over the city evil. So we went to go speak with her about the dragon, and it turns out she was essentially just telling us, hey, explain to me why I should be on your side instead of the dragon's. Most of us did our best to just not say anything to offend her, while our two witches that were in the party both kind of like did like witchy coven politics about, well, this coven does this and this coven does this and this is going to affect this coven and that will, you know, overlap with things that you're doing. And eventually she was like, all right, fine, I will help you out with the dragon. How about if I help you out with the dragon, we go ahead and do a ritual where we curse the dragon? Okay, we'll try that. So the curse they came up with was basically, if the dragon comes into this country and raises any undead from the soil of this country, the undead will turn against it. So he might still build his army outside of the country, but he's not building anybody within the country. So that's at least a little bit more of a disincentive. So we were like, okay, this is good. We get ready for it. We show up for the ritual. For the ritual, she has this thing that is basically like a golem that is bound to individual countries, and they serve as like defenders of different countries in this setting. So they are tied to the borders of this country. So that was our sympathetic focus. If we did the ritual through this thing, it would like infuse through the ground of the area that this golem protects. So we started the ritual, and Brandis was basically saying, okay, this is going to be a ritual, so it's not going to work the way necessarily things would in the standard D&D magic system, because it's going to be more of an extended thing that you're all doing collectively. We figured out that the people that had sympathetic magic obviously were the three witches. We kind of figured the druid is close enough to the witches that his didn't interfere. Our other two players are playing a cleric and a divine trickster, which is basically just someone using divine spells instead of arcane spells as a rogue. And that's too much. That's godly intervention. It's okay if nature and nature spirits get involved, but we don't want gods involved here. That it just gets messy. So we all started the ritual, and I asked if I use my constellation of my dragon constellation form from Circle of Stars, would that help the ritual? And Brandis said, yeah, because this is a ritual, I will let that kind of impart its benefits to everybody that is part of the ritual. And what that particular form does is you get advantage on all of your intelligence and wisdom checks, and you get advantage on concentration checks, and anytime you roll a 9 or lower, it counts as a 10. I figured this is probably a good thing to have going for a ritual. But the other thing that was funny is, since I could share this with everyone else in the ritual, for one time it made more sense for me to use something that wasn't the archer form of the Circle of Stars.
The archer's so good, though.
I may be the first Circle of Stars druid that has ever used something other than archer. So we start the ritual, and not too long after we start the ritual, a gigantic draconic eye starts staring at us. Basically, because the dragon could sense that it was being cursed, it was scrying on us and didn't want to hide its presence from us. It wanted us to know that it was looking at us. All of a sudden, in the room, we feel like this breath go through the room, even though the dragon wasn't there. And the breath animates into animated breaths, which are basically, if you've had Fizban's Treasury of Dragons, they are essentially elementals, but they're elementals that come from dragon's breath. And because this particular dragon is a hybrid black dragon and bronze dragon, we had an acid elemental and a lightning elemental from its breath weapons show up. The acid elemental goes after the dubious witch that we went to speak to and hits her fairly hard, and she didn't drop her part of the ritual because she got to roll her concentration check with advantage. So I already felt like I was contributing. And then right after I felt like I was contributing, the lightning elemental hit me, dropped me to 0, hit me again, and gave me 2 failed death saves. I went down hard.
You were kind of a linchpin in that particular scenario.
Yeah. It also doesn't help that because I wanted this druid to be able to use a greatsword because he's a Githyanki, my constitution is 9. So, I kind of framed it as, since he wrecked on the planet in, our astral skiff, he has some injuries that didn't heal really well from that. So he's still fairly strong, but, he gets a little winded once in a while and things like that. But the reality is he just doesn't have a lot of hit points.
We were giving Dahlia some grief in the old Margrave game because Dahlia is a ranger with a constitution of 8. And it's like, I kind of went off and I'm like, yes, I'm personally affronted by you being a martial character who has negative hit point modifiers.
Oh, goodness. Great thing about this was I got to be on the other side of this and see the cleric cast a banishment, upscale it so it hit both of the breath weapons, and both of them failed.
Nice.
So cleric steps up, boom, gets rid of both of them. They get me back on my feet. I spend another use of my dragon constellation form because I had a feeling this might not be over quite yet, and we probably were still making checks. So I use this again, and at this point, the main witch that we were dealing with has this thing start coming out of her mouth. And basically, because she is trying to curse something else, she had this sort of feedback where all of her wrongdoing and sins started to manifest. So one of the other witches pulls this thing out of her, and it ends up that her sins basically manifested as a bone naga.
Ugh.
Yeah. So we yank the bone naga out of her and then proceed to fight the bone naga while she's trying to finish the ritual. This was one of the greatest things ever. I got to use my guiding bolt, and my guiding bolt went off, hit the thing. I rolled almost maximum damage with that guiding bolt. It was great. And then the cleric followed up right after me, got advantage from my guiding bolt, and critted with his guiding bolt and just shattered it.
Nice.
I was laughing because between using the constellation form and being part of this ritual and all of that, I was like, I felt like more of a caster with this druid than I think I have any other knight, and I literally spent no spell slots because I get to just throw a bunch of guiding bolts out that don't use spell slots.
What level are the characters?
It depends, because it is kind of a West Marches thing. I think we ranged from 9th to 4th.
Gotcha.
Hannah's witch was new, so she's 4th level, which is where Brandis starts people, when they come into it brand new. And I am 6th level now, and I think we had a 9th and another 9th and maybe another 4th. But it was a lot of fun. I really enjoy these. I like the mercenary company framing for this kind of campaign, because I think that works really well for this. The other thing was I really did like Brandis's kind of improvisational thing for how this worked, because he didn't know that's what we were going to do, because every time we do one of these, it's nice if we let him know ahead of time what we're planning on doing, but because sometimes we're not sure who else is going to be able to show up, sometimes it's not until that night when we're following up on that plot thread. So he'll have an outline for how it's supposed to go, but then some of the details he'll have to fill in. So since we had 2 witches and we were going to talk to a witch, he kind of threw together how the ritual was going to work kind of on the fly. I liked that he could tell us that you can share this benefit with everyone in the ritual, because this isn't something that's going to come up that often. You have this really powerful sympathetic focus. You have this very specific thematic goal that you're trying to do with this curse. So it's not like you can just say in the middle of a game, well, you let us do this last time, so now I'm going to extend this to everybody.
Yep.
No, there's a reason that it worked for everybody.
Yep.
And I kind of like that limits that. It doesn't cause it to creep too much.
That's awesome.
We will throw a link to the Worlds Beyond Number Patreon, because then you can take a look at the witch class that Brandis and Hannah and a few other people all had a hand in designing, which we had 2 people playing in that session.
That's awesome.
Now it is time for our Eldritch Invocation. We have a Patreon, and if you would like to help us do this show, we would love it if you decided to join. In addition to supporting the show, we provide a bunch of additional content for your games. Currently, we have shared My Alternate XP Rules, a collected group of RPG tips that got published on Blue Sky every day and then came together on our Patreon. And we have a Discord that you can join, even if you don't want to support us on Patreon. I get it. Maybe you don't. That's fine. We'll forgive you. But we need patrons. Otherwise, we can't Eldritch Blast people. You can find us at patreon.com/THAC0WA.
Welcome to the Dungeon Master's Workshop.
You've heard us joke about how we have D&D at home in regards to D&D at conventions. But why do we say that? Why do I say that? We're going to talk about our experiences playing and running D&D one-shots, but also dive into what makes for a good one-shot and how we can provide good experiences for our players in single-session games, both at conventions and home. So to start this off, what do we mean when we say a quote-unquote one-shot?
The word one implies that there is a singular of something.
If you look up the definition, it actually says achieved with a single attempt or action. I think it's normally talking about sports ball stuff.
Yeah, and basically that's it. It's that you're not saying we're going to get together for a long-term campaign. We are going to come together for this thing so that we can enjoy this scenario and then it will be over.
A self-contained session of an RPG. It tells a complete story around an adventure that begins and ends within a single time span, usually 4 hours, but that can vary. Generally something you see at a lot of conventions or other game events at game stores or other such things.
But I have done them to get a feel for new systems, like when we're missing some players or things like that. That's how we did Dragonbane last year.
Yep. Anytime I need to playtest something, that's a one-shot. I'll invite some local friends or online friends if I'm going to run it online to playtest. Jared actually helped me playtest my Vaesen game. So those are one-shots. So how long has the concept of a one-shot in conventions been around?
A long, long time. The very first Origins in 1975 is where they ran the Tomb of Horrors as a tournament adventure for the first time. And every year at Origins after that for the next few years was the next U-series adventure. So Expedition to the Barrier Peaks and Lost Caverns of Sachcan. Those were all Origins things that started when it was very first rolled out.
I think it's important to note that conventions are actually older than one-shots. Conventions like Gen Con started in 1968.
Oh, yeah.
D&D wasn't published until 1974. I think Chainmail was even like 69, 71, something like that. So Gen Con was primarily like wargaming and that type of thing, and D&D, since it grew out of that hobby, came in later. As Jared mentioned, Tomb of Horrors was run as a kind of a tournament event at Origins. AD&D, Advanced Dungeons & Dragons First Edition, which came out in 1977, was designed with quote-unquote tighter rules to support tournament play.
I'm sorry. I can't not laugh at that.
And the other interesting tidbit about that is it was also designed to stop people playing in ways that Gary Gygax didn't like. He was not happy with the way some people were house ruling things, so he had to put rules in place so people would play the way he wanted to play.
The funny thing about that, Ange and I were discussing that particular quote when we were putting these notes together, and part of what he was annoyed by was the people in California that put out their zine and were doing all their house rules. The problem with that is, of course they had to house rule things in California, because if you read the original D&D and you weren't part of that Midwestern tabletop gaming, you didn't know a third of the rules. You had to make stuff up to get it to work.
The other thing, historically speaking, RPGA was conceived of in 79 and founded in 1980. RPGA was founded to kind of organize the tournaments and stuff that were intended to be, like 4-hour sessions with 4 to 8 players with pre-gen characters. And at the end, GMs and players would decide who the winner was based on rules knowledgeability and roleplay skill. By 87, RPGA focus started switching away from tournaments to shifting to the living campaign, which is much closer to what we know today as organized play. But I know I got started in playing and going to conventions early enough that I also experienced tournaments at some of the local cons, which were an interesting flavor of one shot.
The very first convention I ever went to was a 3-part adventure that I signed up for, but you only got to go to the next part of the adventure if you got voted in as one of the top players in that section, because it would start off with like 4 people running section 1 and 2 people running section 2, and then 1 person running the last one. And I managed to make it to the second round. First time I was ever in a convention game, so I was happy with that.
I was talking about this with some other friends who have, if not the attitude, they have the longevity to call themselves grognards, who also played back in the 80s and early 90s. We all agreed that there was a certain degree of pride you could take in advancing in a tournament, but we're all glad those aren't common today.
Yes.
I don't want to have to compete in my one-shots and my role-playing games.
And my experience is probably a good example of why we don't want that, because I was very happy the first time around, because first time I was ever in something, I was playing a bard, nobody was role-playing, I really hammed it up, I got everybody warmed up, and everybody started role-playing, so I get voted to go into the next section. The next session was that game session where it was like, I swung my sword at him. You didn't say you walked into the room, so you stand in your spot and swing a sword 10 feet away from the thing. No, I didn't. I did not do that. Well, you didn't say you stepped in. Okay.
Yeah.
You could have radically different DMs between different sessions.
Mm-hmm. And also there's the fact that just the idea of having to prove yourself.
Yeah.
To go on and play additional games. I always, at these early conventions that had tournaments, you'd always hedge your bets on signing up for games later in the convention because you didn't know if you were going to advance to the second or the third round. And that means you didn't want to sign up for anything that round. But if you didn't sign up for something, that means you might not have anything to do in that time slot.
That first convention I went to, I didn't bother to go on Sunday because I didn't make it to the third round, so...
I will say, though, as a shy-ish, insecure player, it was very gratifying to make it through second and third round to get a silver reward for playing in a tournament. It's like it was validation that I actually was a decent player, but I don't think that's the model we should be using in modern times.
It's not at all, but I mean, it is kind of like you, I was not super outgoing, or I am definitely more of an introvert. Mm-hmm. I went because I was very curious, but I figured I was just going to kind of sit there and take my cues from everybody else. And that was when I learned, hey, if I am actually in a D&D session and it's a it's a convention, I don't care. Suddenly it just doesn't matter to me whether I'm normally reserved around people I don't know. I'm just going to play this character.
This is a slight tangent from the topic, but I used to say I was shy and introverted, but I had a friend kind of re-educate me. He's like, Ange, you're not shy. You're just guarded.
Yeah.
And he's true, because I'm not actually shy. I am just very careful about putting myself out there. I can't mingle. I remember once I was at Origins with John Arcadian, and we were hanging out at the Big Bar on 2, which is the big hangout space at Origins. And he's like, come on with me. We're going to go meet some designers and some industry people. And I'm like, you want me to go mingle? I can't mingle. I can't do this. And he's like, okay. The thing I found with conventions and one-shots is if I signed up to play a game, that gave me the permission to go to that event, that game, and be social with those people and not have to worry about them not wanting me there because I signed up. I have a right to be here. Mm. And it was pretty eye-opening when I kind of realized that about myself and why I so love going to conventions and playing one-shots. Does a one-shot need to be only one session?
I have definitely seen one-shots that weren't quite done in the time allotted, so they became a two-shot. I think sometimes if you are playing something that is a short adventure but doesn't quite fit into the time that you have to play it, but you're still playing a relatively short scenario, it still pretty much is a one-shot.
My answer to this question depends on whether you are talking about a one-shot you are playing with your friends or if it is a one-shot you're playing at a convention. If you are playing at a convention, yes, it needs to be one session and it needs to be within the time limit. Nothing makes me angrier than a GM running long and going, you guys can all stay, right? No, I can't.
Yeah.
I gave you 4 hours of my life and now you're taking more. I want to go hang out with my friends. Because invariably, if they are running long, it's probably not as good a game as they think it is. But if you are playing with your friends, if you are playing in a more casual situation, there's nothing wrong with a one-shot turning into a two-shot. We did, the first time I ever played 5th edition was basically we were going to do a one-shot and it turned into a two-shot. No big deal. I think you can also, like, sometimes if you want to try out a system, try out, like, a certain aspect of a game, you know, you can do a short campaign and consider it like a one-shot.
Yeah, I think it's hard to get a good grip on something with a one-shot, but you can get a little bit of an idea of it.
Why do we joke we have D&D at home about avoiding D&D at conventions?
So, for one thing, when you're playing D&D at home in an ongoing campaign, you're doing that every week or every other week. It's reliable. You know you're going to have that experience to come back to. So it's kind of nice to say when I'm doing something completely different, I can play Call of Cthulhu, I can play Monster Hearts, I can do stuff that my regular group either won't play or doesn't want to make a lot of extra time for.
I mean, ultimately, when we're doing a campaign at home, that takes a lot of focus, and that's going to be many sessions, and it doesn't leave room to play other things with those same players. So going to a convention gives you an opportunity to do other things. I have so many RPG horror stories about playing at conventions. It probably makes people wonder why I go and play with strangers. And I'm not saying that D&D is always a problem, but I do have a fair amount of bad experiences playing D&D at cons. There was the kid at Burpanomicon. That was a college con that happened, I think, once. He made us sit there and make 2nd edition characters at the table for 2 hours and then started giggling like a maniac when we had our first encounter, obviously intending to try and do a TPK.
Okay.
Yeah, it was, we made excuses. Hey, dude, we gotta go get dinner. Sorry, we gotta go. Because it was just, the only players were me and 2 of my friends. So we're just like, we're gonna dip. Okay, man? There was the last D&D tournament I ever played was at SimCon in 2007. First, the GM ghosted it after the first session, so a new GM had to jump in and run it for the 2nd and 3rd slots. And then there was a player who decided to essentially screw over the rest of the group, preventing us from actually going on the mission that the session was supposed to be. It was brutal. It was very brutal. He took advantage of a mediocre GM who was trying to do their best and did not know how to tell him to stop, and no one else really stood up to him. And so he basically ground everything to a halt as we had to untangle the mess he caused to get one of the other characters out of jail so we could go on our mission. I had later experiences with that player that confirmed that they were chaotic asshole is the best way to describe them. Their joy in games came from screwing over other players and destroying whatever adventure they thought the GM was running.
I have had games where the DM was absolutely great. The session went great. The adventure was a lot of fun, but they pulled in someone to run that was not part of Adventurers League. And when it came time to ask for stuff like, hey, how do I buy this magic item from my faction? I have no idea.
Yeah.
Like, they had no idea how any of that stuff worked, how, whether you were supposed to get some kind of boon from the thing. They just ran the adventure, and the adventure was great. It's just, if you did want those things that Adventurers League normally tracks, you weren't getting it there.
Yeah.
On the flip side, I had someone show up on a Sunday with a hangover because someone dropped out of running. The person with the hangover showed up late, had not read the adventure, and spent the first hour reading the adventure while we were all sitting there at the table, just saying, give me a little bit more time every few minutes. And then we basically kind of like did a speed run through the stuff that sunk into his head.
What do we find to be the largest issue with trying to play D&D at conventions? Because there's a few different things going on here.
I think the irony is, the more fiddly a system is, even if you think that's making it more standardized, that's more things for someone to interpret one way or another. 3.5 was supposed to be so locked down, and this is exactly how it works. And that is not how it ended up getting run. Like, you cannot standardize the experience, and if you think added complexity is standardizing the experience, it may not be doing what you think it's going to be doing. Just too many dials to turn in D&D.
And I think what ends up happening with D&D is, because it is so tremendously popular, and there are so many different people playing it, there are so many different ways to play it. You can have a session that is all combat, that is just a dungeon crawl going from one encounter to another encounter. You can also, at the same time, have another session that has absolutely incredible role-playing, social intrigue, and all this other deep story stuff. These are all D&D, and sometimes you don't know what you're going to get when you sit down to a table of D&D at a convention, because you don't know what type of D&D that GM is going to run and what type of players are going to be sitting down to play that game. Dramatically different stuff. There's also the Adventurers League issue with organized play, where some people are there because they want their character to be in that adventure. And then there's people like me who I don't give a shit about your character. I want the characters that belong in this story.
Yeah.
You know, it's one of the disconnects I have with organized play is, and that's a me thing. That's not saying organized play is bad. I kind of look at it like a little bit like LARPing. People who play LARPs, they're very into their character's story and what's happening for their character in that situation, whereas I prefer a slightly pulled back view, and I want to know the story of everything that's happening at the table. And I want that to be kind of at least a little bit more cohesive and bound together, whereas Adventurers League and other organized play, it's a bunch of disparate people coming together, doing a thing together, and then all going their separate ways again. But that's a me thing.
One of the things that's a little bit nicer when you go to bigger conventions like Gen Con is they can do mustering. So they will get people together and say, what are you playing? You're playing a rogue. Okay. What are you playing? So if you don't have that mustering element, you end up with things like, we're 5 rogues at this table. It's like, oh, this is going to be interesting. But also what they do a lot of times in mustering too is they might say I'm going to have a younger player and then maybe an older player and then somebody in between, so that you're getting a mix of people and classes at different tables as well. Mm-hmm. Not every convention has the manpower to do mustering, though. And it does take a little bit of effort to sit there and go, okay, we want a mix of people at these tables. What criteria am I using to do this? So that can be hit or miss.
It's not even always a manpower situation. It can also be just an audience saturation situation. If you have 6 players show up, you got those 6 players. You can't necessarily mix and match. So have you ever run D&D or similar fantasy-based games as one-shots for the public?
I have done that so many times.
Did you used to run for Adventurers League?
Yes, I ran a ton of Pathfinder Society until I got burned out on it. I started off playing in Adventurers League because that's when I went back to school to finish my degree, but then I ended up running some Adventurers League until I kind of got burned out on it. And On top of that, I every once in a while would run like one shots of different games at the game store. Sometimes it was my regular players, sometimes it was like I did a Fate thing for someone that I didn't know that had never played Fate before, just to show them what that was like. So I have done quite a few one shots for the public before.
I mean, you guys have heard me talk about me running games with Matinee Adventures. I run a lot of con games. D&D doesn't usually fall into that category, but I have run a couple of one-shots for my friends, and I did have one D&D scenario I put together called The Lost Star of Windover that I ran at Gen Con in 2017, and a few other places after that. I was running for Contessa, which was a group that was there to support female GMs, GMs of color, queer GMs, basically just be a little bit more inclusive, have an opportunity to bring those folks in with a support network. And so I made a game that had a pretty diverse set of characters. There were a couple of queer characters. There was a trans character. It was just a very diverse group of characters. And I didn't think about the fact that I was going to be running D&D Gen Con when I put it on the schedule. So there was a moment where I was sitting there waiting for my players to start showing up, where I was trying very hard not to have a panic attack. Because what if a bunch of grognards showed up to my game and were all upset because of what these characters were? I'm like, oh no, what am I going to do? Turns out my anxiety was misplaced because I had a fantastic group of players. I think it was like 5 college-age guys who were all friends with each other and one woman who was separate from them, and they worked really well together. There was a moment at the beginning where I had a little bit of hesitation because 2 of the guys were reading their character backgrounds, and one of them got to the point where it said what his relationship was with that other character, and he's like, dude, have you read your background yet? He's like, no, I was going over my spells. Read your background. It's important. And I'm like, oh no, this could go sideways because that's a pair of secret lovers. And they were a little goofy about it at the beginning, but by the end of that game, they were willing to sacrifice anything for each other, which is exactly what I wanted. I am also going to be running a D&D game at Buckeye Game Fest in March called Shadows of Grief. It's a modification of a scenario I ran at Origins a couple of years ago to introduce my friends' kids and one of their girlfriends to D&D. So it's something I've run before. But normally I don't do D&D. I do other stuff because I have D&D at home.
The thing is, I got into a habit of not running D&D at conventions. One, because somebody else was going to run it. So like in my local conventions, I wasn't worried about trying to provide D&D for anyone. They'll survive. But the other secret part of that is that meant I didn't have to do pre-gens. Because if I was running something like Powered by the Apocalypse, I'm not going to worry about pre-gens. I'm going to, we're going to do like character creation as part of it because I think that's a lot easier in Powered by the Apocalypse than it is in D&D.
Should character creation be part of a one-shot?
Depends. If we're talking D&D and it's your friends and you have a decent amount of time set aside for it, maybe.
Yeah.
If you're talking at a convention, no, not at all.
I'm going to say 80% of the time, no. You should be at the table with characters ready to go for your players. If you are putting it on a convention schedule as a learn to play, then maybe you can take 2 of your 4 hours and walk people through making characters. If it's something you're doing at home to introduce somebody to D&D, then yeah, maybe you can take the time to make characters together. But 80% of the time, people are coming to play the game. They don't want to take, because no matter how fast you think you can walk people through making characters, it's not going to go as fast as you think it's going to, and you're going to lose at least half of your time slot to making characters.
Yeah, I had a little bit of success running a one-shot of Shadow of the Demon Lord at a local convention, but and we did character creation there. But what I said was, we're doing everything by random tables. So you're playing what we roll, just so you can see what those random tables are like, and also so you're not trying to decide things.
There is actually a person that used to attend a lot of conventions local to me who his claim to fame was that he couldn't make a decision. I personally think a lot of what he was doing was kind of a control maneuver to maintain some degree of control on the situation, but he would not make a choice. He would not make a choice. It got to the point where if I was the GM, I'd leave him behind because I'm like, you're not making a decision, so we're going to play so everyone else can play. And when you make a decision, you let me know and I'll get you back into the game. But it was very frustrating. There are games out there that are designed to have character creation be quick and painless at the beginning of a session. A lot of, and I'm not going to say all, but a lot of Powered by the Apocalypse games, you can do those playbooks within 30, 40 minutes. Some of them aren't as easy. Some of them you can do in 30 to 4 minutes and then get into play.
And honestly, I have had sessions where I thought I was going to run something one way, and just going through all of the steps and like the different connection things that some of the games have had me do something completely different, because like, oh, if that person is connected to that person that way, that's what we're doing this time instead.
I used to love when players would apologize to me for ruining whatever game I brought to the table for a Power by the Apocalypse game, because I'm like, my dude, I had no idea what I was going to do until you guys made characters. I don't decide anything until you guys tell me who you're playing, and then I pull from your backgrounds.
I was gonna say, I have a vague theme when I put a PBTA game on a convention schedule. It is so hard to come up with the blurb because I'm trying to just make a concept so that it doesn't just sound like I'm saying we're gonna play whatever, but that concept is so loose and I can modify it so much by the time we actually get finished with it.
I got very good at so if I was running Monster of the Week, it was probably going to be titled Something Wicked. And my blurb would be very generic about, Americana and hunting monsters. If I was running Masks, it was probably going to be Selfies and Justice, or Justice and Selfies. And then it would be a blurb about teen supers coming of age and fighting evil. Nothing about what the story was going to be about, because I didn't know until players showed up. Oh, and if it was running Uncharted Worlds, it was Into the Black, because it's space stuff.
I was going to say, I think one of my Monster of the Week ones was basically, it's Die Hard, but with ghosts. What did that mean? I had no idea. I just said, I'm going to make it Die Hard, but with ghosts. We'll see what we do when we get there.
So let's take a moment and talk about organized play, since it is such a large facet of playing D&D and Pathfinder at conventions. What is it?
So organized play is basically a framework that allows you to play the same characters at different tables in a broadly similar set of campaign assumptions with agreed upon rules that can be used for character creation, advancement, treasure, and similar campaign elements. So most organized play scenarios are one-shots within a certain theme, and some organized play adventures are multi-part stories, but they're generally written to be self-contained chapters that hint at the next part of them, rather than being like a cliffhanger that you wouldn't know the answer to until you play that second part of it.
And I believe most of them will have, this is an adventure for 1st to 5th level characters.
Yes.
This is an adventure for 5th to 10th level characters, or they'll frame them in buckets like that, so whatever level your character is, you know which game you can kind of jump into.
Yeah, broadly speaking, at least for like Adventurers League, you'll have like a tier 1 adventure, and you might have people at the table at a 3rd level, you might have people at the table at a 1st level, but all of those tier 1 adventures are kind of in the same place. And there's usually guidelines to say if somebody's on the high end, if your table averages on the high end, do this. If it's averaging on the low end, take this out. So there'll be things like that in a lot of those adventures too.
And most organized play groups are, I'm going to say national, but I don't know if that's the right term for this. These are groups that are organized in a broader scale. They usually run at major conventions like Gen Con and Origins, but they also provide support for people to run at other smaller conventions.
There are some that are a lot looser and some that are a lot tighter. Like 13th Age had an organized play program, but it also, there wasn't a lot of like, oh, you can only advance if you do this many adventures or you get this many magic items. It was 13th Age. They were like, bring a character and you can probably bring the same one next week. It was essentially just to encourage GMs to run it at game stores or conventions.
Yeah.
And tell people, bring whatever in. You can't break it that much.
So what are the pros and cons of modern organized play, since it is a little bit different from what we talked about with RPGA in the early days and doing tournaments and stuff like that?
So this is coming from somebody that did a lot of Pathfinder Society and a decent amount of Adventures League from running it, and I played a lot more Adventures League. So I have that as a background. Also, I'll throw this out here. I was one of the people that helped put together the first Pathfinder Society document. We got sent it out from the people at the top and said, what kind of things did we miss? You know, what kind of things would you change? There was a handful of us. So my name, if you have one of those from 2008, my name was actually in that first Pathfinder Society document. And I don't want to claim any of the later ones because it turned into a mess that I don't want my name on. So that having been said, one of the pros, you can find a game even if you don't have a home game. And if you have access to a game store or a convention, you can play a game that you like.
It's a way a lot of people get into playing D&D.
Mm-hmm.
You'll hear people say, I really want to try D&D. And the suggestion will be go to your local game store that runs Adventurers League.
Yeah.
Or Pathfinder Society, and it'll let you get in and play a game with other people. It's like I was talking about in my social hang-ups. It gives you permission to be at the table and play that game with those people.
Part of why I ended up running some Adventures League at the game store was because we were getting so many people in, because all of a sudden you had that influx of like Stranger Things and Critical Role people coming in and saying, I want to check this thing out. And there weren't enough DMs some nights, because that was back when Wizards was really pushing Wednesday night to be a specific night that you would run Adventurers League. And we did. We had a lot of new people in those earlier days of Adventurers League that would come in. The other thing that I was going to say is if you're a forever DM, Organized Play is a place where you can actually go and play as a player once in a while. So that's kind of a good thing to have available. Organized Play can be a good showcase for a new set of rules or a new campaign setting for new players that haven't experienced those rules or that setting before. It can be. We're going to go into this a little bit in the cons, but a lot of Organized Play will start off where it is good at onboarding new people, and then it switches to retaining people that are already in the program, which tends to be the exact opposite of being good at onboarding people.
I have a friend who he has a Pathfinder Society character that he likes to take to all the conventions because he knows what experience he's going to get if he signs up for a Pathfinder Society game. It is sometimes easier for him to jump into one of those games than take a chance on something else that may or may not be a good game, may or may not have, a good GM that he's never heard of. He knows what he's going to get at those Pathfinder Society games. So that's something to be said for the folks who are like, they know what they're getting into, but they also decided that is something they enjoy.
I will say one of probably the least major cons is a lot of these scenarios are going to be one-shots. So if this is your primary way to experience this particular fantasy game that you like, you're not going to get a long-term deep storyline like Curse of Strahd. You're going to get a one-shot where you're rescuing someone from a werewolf. It's not going to be that same deep campaign level experience, especially at a convention.
At best, you're going to get a series of one-shots.
Yeah.
And like I was saying before, people who focus on their character's story inside their own head, that may be fine because they can weave together those pieces into being something cohesive for themselves. Other people, that may not scratch the itch they have.
Now, the other thing is you can this is where you get like this weird hybrid of Adventurers League or other organized play. A lot of times there are rules for you to run like an adventure like Curse of Strahd using the Adventurers League rules, but when you're doing that, it's usually because you're running it for a set group of people that are going to show up every week to play it, and they just want to be able to take these characters and play those characters at conventions once in a while, but they still want to come back and run this like a regular campaign.
Yeah.
That's an interesting thing. It's not nearly as easy to jump in and out of something like Curse of Strahd as it is just a regular one-shot adventure.
I will say another con that you can have in organized play is sometimes the players get a little cliquish.
Uh-huh.
You can end up with situations where this is supposed to be something that is welcoming to new players to get them into the hobby, and you end up with players who are like, I don't want that newbie at my table. Their character's not going to be outfitted well enough to do what we want to do. I ran into that with Shadowrun missions because there came a point after Catalyst bought Shadowrun that all official Shadowrun games at conventions were missions.
Yeah.
And I stopped going because I didn't have a regular character. I just wanted to play some Shadowrun. And I'd get people who would start rolling their eyes if I showed up to the table with an unoutfitted pregen. So it was just like, why am I bothering this? And I've heard other stories where people have had unwelcoming experiences trying to play in organized play when they were new and just getting their feet wet. If they didn't get the right person to kind of bring them in, it could be very off-putting.
Every organized play that I've been part of, other than 13th Age, which didn't even last that long, but it was fun while it lasted. And by every, I basically mean Pathfinder Society and Adventurers League. Eventually, at some point, the focus seems to shift from being accessible to new people to retaining people that are already part of the infrastructure. And a lot of times, because those people are very well versed in rules, and you have a lot of people that being well versed in rules will push the boundaries of those rules and figure out how to get, like, you know, a staff of power when they're third level, then all of a sudden the Adventurers League rules get stricter, and you need to know more rules to begin with. So for a beginner, it gets more complicated. So all of a sudden, this thing that was good for showing people that have never played D&D what D&D is like are suddenly saying, here, read this entire rule book and know all the ins and outs of it before you dare to sit at this table.
The last con I'll put on organized play is and this is an issue I have with any group that runs games at conventions. Not all of them vet their GMs very well.
Yes.
And sometimes with organized play, they're looking for bodies and seats, and they don't necessarily make sure the GM they're putting at a table has the skills to actually give their players a good game. Some of it's just inexperience. Some of it is they don't care. They're just there to sit in 4 games to get their badge for the con. But my biggest complaint about organized play has always been that I wish they would take more time to vet and educate their GMs on how to be better for their players.
Pathfinder Society tried to address that at one point in time by letting people rank DMs after they had played with them. This is not good. This does not fix anything. I will argue with anybody that wants to say it was a good idea, because it wasn't. Because what happens is, first off, who usually ranks somebody? Like, if you get home from a convention and you're worn out and you don't want to do anything and you would take effort to log onto your computer and rank somebody, who's likely to do that?
The person who's angry and has something to say about it.
Yep, exactly. And the other thing is, what criteria are you ranking them on? Because it was just like a star rating. And the thing is, the guy that was a complete idiot and got killed because he was a complete idiot will blame you and, you know, give you 1 star for this session, or because he missed that one piece of treasure because he blew up the room instead of searching it. And then all of a sudden you're getting a low rank because somebody heard somebody else had a better experience, and that's not what he had at the table, so you're getting a 1 star. I'm just saying it's not a good system.
Yeah, I think there's a place for player feedback, but
Feedback, definitely.
Shouldn't be a ranking system. It shouldn't. Yeah. They tried to slap a simple solution on a complicated problem.
Yeah.
What makes for a good one-shot? Let's give some actual practical advice to our listeners about how to run a good one-shot.
First off, don't do a sandbox.
Oh God, please no.
Yeah, sandboxes are bad for one-shots. People will have to deal with the fact that it's probably going to be a little bit more of a linear adventure. That doesn't mean don't give them choices. It does mean that the big overall plot should be the same way. It's
linear does not mean railroad.
No.
Linear means you're in one spot, that leads to the next spot, that leads to the next spot. You're still dependent upon the characters doing things in those locations and discovering things, making the choices that they're going to make. A railroad is, I don't care what you're doing, you're moving to the next part.
Yeah, I get my example for that would be in the second scene, you have to take out an ogre. You could go up to it and just fight it. You could go up to it and try and negotiate. You could try and charm it. You could climb up the hill and roll a boulder down on it. Those are all options. Railroad is the only way you will ever defeat this ogre is if you figure out how to roll that boulder down onto the ogre. That's a railroad.
Yeah.
You're taking away any of their other options and just saying, do this thing that I'm telling you.
Yeah. Another thing I'll suggest for one-shots is you want to have a good opening. In that opening, make sure you have an opportunity for the players to role-play with each other, introduce their characters to each other. Even if the characters are all part of the same party, have them introduce themselves because the characters may be together, the players aren't. So have them introduce themselves. Have a good opening. Have a good hook for whatever's going on. And then have a good finale. And then in the middle, you have options. You have options that they can engage with because you're going to have some groups that take so long in that opening part that you're going to eat up a large chunk of your session, and trying to do the 3 things you have between them and the finale is really going to be problematic. And you, as I said, you don't want to be the GM who's like, you guys don't have anything after this, do you?
Yeah.
You need to wrap up in the time slot you have. Most of the time at conventions, that's going to be 4 hours. Sometimes you can schedule it for 6 hours, but most of the time it's going to be 4 hours. Have a beginning, have an ending, and have stuff you can put in the middle that makes sense.
I would also say, if you are specifically running D&D, try and hit what D&D says its 3 pillars are. Try and have like an exploration scene, make sure you have a role-playing scene, make sure you have a combat scene, because especially somebody's going to want to make sure they get at least one fight in. Somebody's going to want to play in character. Exploration is usually a little trickier. Just remember, exploration isn't necessarily we walk from this part of the forest to the other. It is also interacting with a room to see what's in a box. You know, it's anytime you are being inquisitive and finding out answers to questions. That's exploration.
I would definitely say, definitely try and make sure you have each of those components. I didn't talk about this earlier, but one of the most frustrating D&D games I ever played at a con was a dumb game where we were a bunch of stupid kobolds, and I chose a fighter just because I'm tired. I just want to hit some things. She never gave us any combat. There was nothing for us to do except walk between point A and point B and be dumb about it. And then at the end, there was a dragon, and I basically killed my character charging at the dragon because I was tired of sitting there for 3 hours doing nothing because everyone was just being goofy little kobolds. I'm sure some people had a great time in that game. I was not one of them. I would have really liked just a simple combat.
I would also say go back and listen to our 5-room dungeon thing, because I think we have a lot of the advice that we went through, and that is good for designing a one-shot. Just remember that you might not get to all 5 of those rooms. So maybe you look at our advice on doing a 3-room dungeon that we go into on that same episode.
Another aspect of this, it's kind of twofold. Make sure you have all your materials ready to go.
Yeah.
Don't be scrambling I got to run back to my room to get the adventure or get the characters or something like that. Be ready to go. Have all your stuff printed. Make sure you have everything ready to go at the convention. And part of that is make sure your player-facing materials are decent and good to go. Nothing tells me a GM cares less about my experience in their game than a character sheet that has barely anything on it and has coffee stains on it. Make sure your pre-gens have everything the players need to play that character. You don't need to give them a book. You don't need to sometimes you don't even need to give them a background, but you should at least give them a clean character sheet that has everything filled out on it and is ready to go. That tells the player you care about the experience they're going to have at your table.
You may not have the resources for this, but one thing that I always like to do when I was running one-shots, especially for people that I didn't know, is I had extra dice. I had a bag of pens, a bag of pencils, because sometimes people just don't remember to bring certain things, and you don't want people hunting around trying to figure things out. So it's like, hey, I have like 10 extra sets of dice. Go ahead and use one of these if you want to.
Yep, I always have extra dice. I have a separate pouch of pens and pencils that I put out for people to use. I always make sure the character sheet is theirs to take home. Some people like them as souvenirs. I laminate anything that is a handout I want back, but I'm a little extra with that type of thing, so.
Whenever I was running Pathfinder Society, I usually pre-drew my maps for encounter areas. Because yes, sometimes you can get out the dry erase or wet erase grid and draw it in the moment. But every once in a while, especially like if it's a puzzle room or if it's, supposed to have a secondary thing going on during a combat, don't mess that up, because sometimes it's really important to actually make sure everything's set up the way it's actually telling you to set it up. The other thing I would say is if you are running at a convention or a game store and you have a time slot, because we've been talking about this a few times. If you have a 4-hour time slot, if you hit that last hour, you immediately shift gears into the final encounter. That's what you do. You just do it.
I was once running Dragon Age, the age system game from Green Ronin, at a con, and I ran into a situation where I had the entire scenario planned out, but that first encounter lasted way too long because of everyone was new to the system. There's a latency built into that system. So first introductory combat took an hour and a half. So I had to pivot away from the mystery that they were going to be exploring and just give them a couple of hints of it. And then basically we hit that 3-hour mark, final battle, because I needed to give them a complete story. You need to be flexible with what you're presenting to make sure you give people that beginning, middle, and end.
If you have, say, 4 encounters planned out for this thing, try to pick at least one that you could drop, because that'll make it a lot easier. And if you plan that ahead of time, then you can start thinking, oh, if they don't do this encounter, I need this to show up at the end of this encounter instead to make sense to drop to that final encounter. That way it's not even seeming as abrupt. You don't have to hand wave and say, oh yeah, you explored this other area and found this key so we can do the last encounter. You could just move the key to the other thing because you knew ahead of time, this is the encounter I would have liked to done it, but we didn't have time, so we're just going to drop this one.
And like I said, sometimes you'll have a group that'll rip through everything and you can do every single encounter you planned and you'll still end a half an hour early.
Mm-hmm.
Other times you'll be struggling to keep the group moving.
I'd also say this too. If everything is going right and everybody's happy and you end an hour ahead of time, don't try and drag it out. If it feels like you came to a good ending, end it.
Yeah.
Don't worry about it.
Last piece of advice with running a good one-shot, give everyone a break in the middle.
Yes.
I've seen this happen to a lot of GMs. They get very focused on running the game that they forget that it's a 2-hour mark.
Yep.
You should probably give everyone a 10-minute break to let them hit the bathroom, grab a snack, grab a drink, whatever, because you are so focused on running. I experienced this a little differently. I always remember the break, mostly because my bladder won't let me forget. But what I forget to do is my table selfie, because I'm so focused on running the game that everyone gets back from break, which is when I will take the table selfie in any other game I'm playing, and I will forget to take it because I'm so focused on getting everyone back into the game and keeping things moving.
When I was running a lot at conventions, I would set an alarm to go off at the 2-hour mark and then at the 3-hour mark, so that I knew this is when everybody goes and takes a break. This is when we start wrapping up and going towards the final encounter. The other thing that's nice about that too is you kind of know when everyone gets back from that bathroom break, if that encounter hasn't even started yet, you know you may not want to run it to the fullest extent, because by the time they get back, if it takes 15 minutes for everybody to get back from the bathroom, now you have 45 minutes to wrap this up. Is that enough time?
So what are the different skills you need for running one-shots versus campaigns?
I think that time management thing that we were talking about is a big one. It's not that you shouldn't be cognizant of people's time in a campaign, but it is less critical in a campaign than it is at a convention.
It's way more forgiving in a campaign.
Yeah.
Especially a campaign with your friends. You know, you run long, you run short, whatever. People are going to be okay with it. At a con, especially for strangers, they have given you that 3-hour and 50-minute block of their life.
Yeah.
You need to respect their time. You know, and that's not even getting into paid GMing or anything like that. If you're at a con and they signed up to play your game, you need to make sure you respect their time and manage your time management in the game better.
That game that I talked about that I played of Brandis's, we ran over in that game. And we were all good with that because this is a long-term consequence for that campaign. Whatever affects that dragon is going to be affecting that campaign maybe years into the future of people playing in this campaign. That's a little bit different than, can you stay a half hour longer so that I can get this one extra puzzle room in that you might not even remember 2 months from now, and I'm going to make you late for a game that you might like better than this one.
This is kind of going back to the previous question, but again, I have so many horror stories. People wonder why I play games at conventions. Some of my worst experiences have been GMs who have been unable to deviate from the adventure in front of them. And I'm not talking about organized play or anything like that, where they may have certain things they need to hit in that adventure. I'm talking about a guy who refused to start his game because he had 4 players instead of 6 players.
Yeah.
Or refused to, actually get to the finale because we didn't get to the 3rd encounter, and he needed to do that before we could fight the big bad at the end. And it's at that point, I'm walking away because I have other things that I need to do, want to do. So it's the manage your time, respect your players' time and investment in your game.
I think that is another good skill, too, is know how many players you can manage.
Mm-hmm.
I used to assume, because Pathfinder Society and Adventurers League would say you could have up to 8 people at a table, that I needed to schedule 8 slots every time I ran one of those. That is a great way to burn out on things. I got to the point to where it was like, if I'm running a convention game and they're letting me say how many players I'm going to take, I'm going to say 5.
I still say 6. 6, I feel like, is my comfort spot. I have a lot of friends who will say 5 and keep a 6th character kind of for a friend or a walk-up or something along those lines. But it is very important to understand how many players you can manage. Again, back in the day, 8 was standard, so you had people running for 8 players. I ended up having the convention runner talk me into having 8 slots in a Masks game. Not the last time, but one of the times I ran it at Running Gag, and it worked. It was a good game, but there were at least 3 of the players there who were more spectators than participants. They still enjoyed it, but I felt bad because I didn't feel like I was giving everyone the experience they needed. I also conversely have an opposite issue. 3 players is almost too few for me. I can do it.
I need at least 3.
3 is almost too few because that game is going to finish way quicker than it should otherwise. And part of that is I, as the GM, don't have those moments to just sit back and let my players interact with each other.
Yeah.
They're all looking at me for what happens next. what to do, and there's fewer moments of them discussing, debating, role-playing with each other. And I find that exhausting. I've never gotten to the point of saying I won't run for 3.
Yeah.
But I definitely prefer 4 or 5.
I'm okay with 3, but 2 starts to get a little hard because then it's just like, it is either you, or it's me.
Yeah. Last question. We talked about how varied experiences can be playing D&D at conventions. Some people are just there to do combat. Some people are there to just be goofy. How can we tell from an event description if it's going to be a good game for us? And conversely, on the other side of that coin, how can we write better descriptions so players know what to expect when they show up to our games?
If a game is not usually meant to be a humorous game and someone is trying to run it as kind of a comedic session of D&D, I will avoid that like the plague because I do not know their sense of humor. If the game has a certain amount of humor baked into it, then I'm like, okay, I know what the game system is like. If someone is trying to inject that into a game system, I don't trust you enough for this, dude. Unless I know you.
Especially when it's slapstick humor, like that Kobold game I was talking about. It's like, that's not my cup of tea. But other people may love it. So I think pay attention to the language, the way they're describing what the game is going to be. If it tells you that you can bring your own character, that's generally going to tell you what the GM is going to be more focused on their adventure and less on the characters that are in that adventure. That for me is a red flag. I'm going to avoid that game. Other people may be fine bringing their own character to that game, but you start paying attention to those things.
I will also say, and this is nothing against anyone that is designing something, but if it is a convention that is not a convention set up for playtesting games or anything, if you put something on the schedule and you say that you're playtesting some rules as part of this, I don't necessarily want to do that at a convention. That's just not...
Yeah.
I want to play something that you're already sure of.
Yeah, I get that. There actually are conventions out there where the goal is to playtest stuff. And part of the role of the players and the attendees is to give feedback on stuff. If I'm going to Origins, I'm paying $100 just for my badge and several $100 for my hotel room. I don't want to work for you, man. I mean, I'll still try and give my GM feedback on the game, but it's like, if you are writing your description for your event, you can put in, if it's combat focused, if it's roleplay focused, the maturity level you're looking for. These are all things you can include in that description to help your players understand what they're signing up for.
I would also say, don't be afraid to build your hook into your blurb that you're writing for your event description. Even if it's something the players won't know until the first 15 minutes when whoever hires them, it's okay. It's like a movie trailer. You can give them an idea of what it's going to be ahead of time.
Yep, absolutely. You can even name your big bad.
Oh, yeah.
In your event description. You know, it's okay if they knew who they're going to be fighting. They're still not going to fight him till the end of the game, but...
Sometimes it's a selling point. Like, if you're like, hey, do you want to kill a dragon? You know?
Wait, you mean playing Dungeons and Dragons and actually fighting a dragon?
I know. Yeah, and I will also say, as far as like what to avoid and what to avoid as a player or writing it, I have read certain event descriptions that just ooze elitism. Like, you can kind of tell they're trying to weed out players. And the funny thing is even if I'm not the type of player they want to weed out, knowing that they're trying to weed out people with their language weeds me out anyway.
I think in conclusion, I will say that while I tend to avoid D&D at conventions, I still want D&D to be good at conventions for people, because there are a lot of people who want to play it, who want to get their feet wet in this particular game, in this style of game. My hope is that more people will be better about the games that they're running. You're still going to end up with horror stories. It's okay. It's okay. Because for every horror story I have, there's probably a dozen great games that counterbalance it. It's just the horror stories are fun to talk about.
Funny thing is just on the last Pandas Talking Games, Phil was talking about how sometimes the horror stories that you have from conventions are what make the good games worth going to at conventions as part of the convention experience. That having been said, you don't want like a safety issue bad game at all.
No safety issue bad games.
But he has a point. Sometimes those bad sessions make you go, man, I really appreciated that last GM that I had.
Now let's join Ange and Jared for some downtime research, where they do the work so we don't have to.
Every episode, we're going to look for something related to D&D that we want to pass along to our listeners. It might be products, websites, videos, or podcasts, but it will always be something that we think will enhance your D&D experience.
So the thing I'm going to share has very little to do with actual D&D or gaming. It is tangentially related. Basically, Hank Green has a show called Ask Hank Anything, and it's basically a talk show where he has a guest come on and ask him a whole bunch of questions. It's like a reverse talk show. It's actually kind of brilliant because Hank knows a lot of stuff. And in this particular episode, they do reference Mentopolis and the time he played the Fix, who was an enforcer who would terrify people with his absolutely scary facts about physiology and weird trivia about bodies and things. The GM for that game was Brennan Lee Mulligan, who is his guest on the latest episode of Ask Hank Anything. And the first question that Brennan asks him is, what animal should I avoid punching? And it's like the questions, it is delightful because it is both the best of Brennan Lee Mulligan and the best of Hank Green combined together, being weirdly nerdy.
Uh-huh.
The ultimate answers to what animal should I avoid punching was a human baby. So there you go.
Yes, I would agree with that. I am in agreement there. Yeah. Oh my goodness. Speaking of punching baby, no. That's a terrible transition. On February 3rd, so around the time this episode's going to be dropping, the Kickstarter for the Dark Matter Mega Box should be going live. What is Dark Matter? There was a version of this setting for the 2014 rules, but the new Mega Box is converting this over to the 2024 rules. It is basically a fantasy... It is basically a space fantasy game, and by that I mean there are sci-fi elements, but it is also a place that is literally magical. So if you've seen like Esper Genesis, that is more of a Mass Effect style thing where all of the D&D elements are kind of flavored more as like super science rather than as supernatural. But Dark Matter is a place where there are actually sorcerers that are on board a ship with a warp drive. That's the type of setting that, that this is. It's a lot more like Paizo's Starfinder than it is just a straight, space opera type setting. I'm interested in that kind of stuff. I think it could be fun. They're going to have new species and subclasses and rules for things like mecha and starships. So I'm always interested to see how people mess up starship combat. I didn't say that out loud, did I? Anyway, I'm very interested in it. So if that's the type of thing that's interesting to you, then you can check that out, and we will have a link in the show notes.
We are happily part of the Polygamers Podcast Network, helping you run and play your best games. We think you'll enjoy another one of the Polygamers Podcast shows, like
Pandas Talking Games. Queer gamers talking about tabletop role-playing games and making outtakes. Join Pandas, Phil, and Senda every other Wednesday answering listener questions about playing, running, and designing TTRPGs. It's like Car Talk, but for your games.
We have used up all of our resources, so I think it's time for a long rest. I'm exhausted from the convention. I hope this adventure was rewarding for you, and we hope you go exploring with us when we start our next adventure or go to our next con.